all for being here with us Tuesday night. This is our last evening community forum to discuss and share information about the future renovation. We've got Kevin McCurdy from LWC. He is going to show you all the fancy pictures about where we're at in terms of what the future space could look like, layout options, and conceptual site programs. And there will be time at the end, I'm sure, for questions as well.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll turn it over to him. Thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you all for taking time out of your Tuesday evening yet again. Many of you have been here in the previous session, so I appreciate your willingness to a third time contribute to the process we're going through. To me, this is going to be my favorite presentation. We're going to actually get to show you the detailed plan views, as well as some renderings of what things are starting to look like, so that you'll get a feel for what are we talking about and what have we been talking about in very general ways. And a lot of this tonight is really going to depend ultimately on you, where we've had a lot of stuff to get through before to kind of explain some of the process. You all have been giving your input, so this is more about we've pulled all that stuff together and here's really the outcome of that process. So there's not as much stuff to go through, and that's, I think, going to give more time to actually ask those follow-up questions to Dina's point as we go through to ask for additional clarification. So tonight, if you all are silent, we could be done in 45 minutes. If you have a lot of questions, we could, as usual, be here for 2 hours. So I'm happy to answer questions as we go, because again, this is really more about helping you all understand, like, where are we at in this process, because the next step is a very important step. So before I get too far ahead of myself, and I just did a whole bunch. That's right, and I hadn't even used it, so she's making fun of me because I finally have a laser pointer that she walked us through this. So let's see if it's working here. There we go. So I did bring in a little bit of just recap information, just in case we had some new folks here, since we're really charting the course for kind of jumping off the edge here to really start the process in earnest. Yes, even though we've been working, we've got some big steps to get over to continue forward on this. We are looking at the design phase really going through next year, which I know seems like a long time, but just to really do a project of this scale takes quite a bit of time to get right and coordinated. We would then be, if we've got finished with the design and bidding some point next year, there'd be construction in 2027 with an opening that following year, likely in 2028, because it's probably going to be a 16-18 month construction process, so there's quite a bit of library here for the scale of what we're talking about. In terms of the timeline, this is the same timeline we've been looking at. The two that are highlighted, sorry, I'm still learning my technology, old dog, new tricks. What's highlighted here is where we're at. So this is the May 6th session. Again, for anybody who may not make it tonight, please suggest to them that they come on Saturday. I think it's important for as many people as possible to see this information. But I think the really important part here is this part down at the bottom. Ultimately, and I know I've shared this before, the library can't approve its own project financially because the board is appointed, they're not elected officials. So ultimately, the project has to go to the elected officials that represent us as a community. And because the majority of the people that have houses that come to this library are in the county, it ends up being the county body that we have to go to. So our next step, and that's why I said it's a big jump from where we're at to go through to get to the next round of what we can do to continue to move this forward, we've got to go get approvals at the June 4th and then the August 6th meeting. So the June 4th will be the introductory meeting to just say, here's what we're talking about. And then we believe, if things stay on track, the August 6th meeting would be and we would like to go forward with this project, which means we're going to issue some bonds that will actually pay for this work to happen. So that's the big piece that's in front of us as the next step. What's that?
Are those county meetings?
They are, yeah. It's a public meeting, and it's a case of, just kind of backing up here, it's a case of where at this point in particular, having gone through quite a few of these, because, you know, every library has to do it and work on a lot of libraries. I've had projects that either fail or succeed based on what kind of outcome we have and people showing up to these. And it's not just people physically showing up, that does help, so by all means, I mean, feel free to come. And if the dates change, we've got the typical at the end of this slide, how to stay connected to the process, so I'm sure that will be put out if there's a change to this. but it's also other organizations writing letters, so, other community organizations that work collectively with the library. So all of that is being collected by the library that will be part of the case statement to the county council to say this is why this is important. It's also why this process is important, to make sure that we've responded to and incorporated, frankly, what matters to the community. This is not the library staff, this isn't, we would just like to spend money, it's that we're trying to do meaningful stuff, and that's the case we ultimately need to make to county council. I know everybody asked one question, I give this like long soliloquy, so I hope that answered. Yes, sir.
So also, along with that meeting then, are they only going to listen to the people that own property, since that's a lot of where the money's coming from? Or will they also listen to the rest of us? Because I don't own a property, but I'm a taxpayer, and also, I mean, I'm involved with this library because I'm down here all the time, and what happens with this library, with this construction, is going to affect me. So I think I should have my voice heard as well.
I've never had them at one of those sessions say you can only come up and speak if you own property. Typically it's an open, does anybody have any comments about the project? And then they do ask, can you give your name and address typically, but I don't think you have to say, hey, I own property or not. That's, you get a weigh in regardless.
Okay.
So I would encourage you, if you feel compelled to, come speak on behalf of, hopefully, the project, that yes, it's an open and you would have the ability to speak for or against it.
Thank you.
So I added this in, this image, just again, for anybody who hasn't been at the previous sessions, as just a reminder for some of what drove this, because we've been talking about kind of fun planning processes. It's easy to forget at the end of the day, this is why we've been having these conversations. So this is on the front of the building, where the signage is, where you come over the ramp. What there is, and I know the staff have been collecting these at the library, it's really the structural issue that exists all around the library. This is that steel lintel that you're seeing down here. That's really what should be holding up this brick. You can see obviously there's a pretty big opening there. I mean, you could physically stick your hand in that if you were up there on a lift. It's a good 1.5 inches of space that this lintel has started to fail. Now, again, it's not cause to necessarily run, an alarm and, the house is on fire. Because the good news is that it happens to be sitting on the flange of that beam, but that's just really happenstance that that's occurring. What it's doing is, if you've ever seen a masonry wall built, there's anchors in there that are holding that brick back, but the fact it's sitting so far forward of that is putting more pressure on those ties than there should be. So at some point, this brick will fail. But again, it's not like tomorrow it's gonna fall down. It's just, this is only gonna continue to get worse and worse and worse, so we have to do something about this. But that's really what started the cascade of, the reality is the brick all around this building and the steel around this building is not in good shape, and something's gonna have to be done that's a pretty significant starting to take things off the building. The other thing is, being a building that was built in 1963, and a lot of the systems that are still those systems, they're just in need of replacement at this point. The reality is the library is paying a lot of money to continue to repair things. It's kind of that having an older car, nothing wrong with it, but you're gonna pay a lot more in repair costs than you are with a newer car. And again, that's just a trade-off. One's not good, one's not bad. It's just ultimately what's gonna work from a budgeting perspective. And the way that public organizations are funded, it is typically more cost-effective in the way they are funded to fix the things up front and then have them set for a time period and then continue to have to make those repairs. So again, that's what's really driving this. So it's not a vanity project, it's a we have to do something, and what we have to do is a big something. So as part of that, why don't we get the facility in a position that it better provides the services that we as a community want? The other part on this slide is really about that process. So one of the things that we've been talking about even with staff is there's all these steps for designing a project. These are the 3 steps in which, like, we as architects with the rolled up drawings and the T-square in the old days, and the drafting table are doing, schematic design, design development, construction documents before we get to bidding. Even with all the work we've done, we're really only about 25% into this phase. So there's a lot, if you think about how long that's taken, we have the rest of that phase to finish, plus these 2 to go through before it'd be ready to bid. And again, that has everything to do with the fact that we have to get a lot of input. We haven't frankly even engaged like all the structural engineers and mechanical engineers, et cetera, that have to become a part of this project to make it a reality. And that's not to say it's all, pie in the sky and not reality. We do enough of this that we can design those up to a point. The engineers typically put okay, yes, you have a duct there, but it needs to be this big, or that beam needs to be this big. So everything we're showing you will work, but we need the time that's in these phases to get it, all of the systems that support that to work. So that's what the additional time will be. So once we get approval from county council, that would be that we're going from 25% all the way then through the rest of that process for construction. The other thing to point out with this, given we are so still early in this phase, there are things we're going to look at today that will change between now and the final project that you see. Some of that will be where you go through this process and realize, ooh, there's a better way, there's a more efficient way. Ooh, that beam got bigger than we thought, we're going to have to make an adjustment. Some of it will also be potentially budget, and that's where the council meeting, if the council says, we're only going to allow you to do that, we may have to make adjustments based off of that. So it's one of these just a cautionary tale. I appreciate everybody's time, and we've put a lot of work into this, but things may change just with the realities of what the next steps are. So that's just something we have to be prepared for. Hopefully we will get this all approved, and everything you see, as magical as it is, we will be able to bring to fruition when we get to the construction phase, but sometimes that's not the reality. So we're going to jump into building program. Again, for those who have been here before, nothing has really changed, and I said 63, built in 1973, with the children's edition in 1994, with the total building being 53,000 square feet. The upper level is a little bit bigger than the lower level, and that's because there are some areas like the teen program area, some of the children's area that does not have basement below it. So that's why there's a little bit more up on that upper level than the lower. But again, a pretty good sized building of the ones that we've worked on in the area. These are just two graphics that we pulled back up that had seen before, so if you'd been to previous sessions. This image here on the left, that's the building as it exists today with the stacked layouts and the program. This being the children's area, this being that on the upper floor where all the adult stacks are out there, and then the teen room down there on the end. Everybody comes across the bridge up to the desk, and this is all the white area that you're seeing in the plan. That's more staff space. And again, the utilization of that is about 80% public, which is all of the stuff that's in colors. That's the stuff we can all get to. And the 20% staff being the white area that really is, we don't necessarily go into unless the staff invite us. That's pretty normal balance of square footage as we've talked before. And that's what we're trying to achieve as we go through with any of these renovations to maintain that. This is what we looked at the last time, where it was really that color blocking exercise where we said, trust us, within this color here will be all of this magical stuff that will be developed for children. And within this red block will be all of the stuff, meeting rooms, tables, chairs. This is what we looked at the last time. It's really how do we go from where we are today to where we want it to be, and develop this and working with the staff through a lot of meetings. Just as a reminder to ourselves, this plan looked at a circulation desk somewhere in the middle and an entrance on both the north side, so the north bay is up here, as well as maintaining this side, keeping the outdoor spaces, upper patio, but making it accessible to the adult and not just the children's. Patio below, children's, teens, staff, and then the red being adults services. So that was our next turn on this. We did a similar thing down on the lower level. Again, this being the existing condition, but in this case, we were pretty skewed with 40% being public. Again, the areas in yellow is what the public can get to, 60% being back of house staff spaces. This is what we had looked at the last time, with really saying that's all staff, which is kind of similar to what is going on now with a lot of staff down in this area. Really creating more of a genealogy history space that has its own presence, so it's not just here as part of tech services. And then really developing some additional meeting spaces here in blue and a few smaller ones here and then adult nonfiction being down here associated with genealogy, and this being a skylight stair area here. And then we had also talked about adding a light well here to help bring in some light, some natural daylighting to staff and genealogy areas. So that was the leap that we took the last time. Now what we've got is really taking and mapping all of these color blocks. So I just took that image from, and then come back to the upper level, but took that color block to here's where we are today. So at this point, you can start to see where all of the tables and chairs are. You can start to see where all the individual rooms are. So if I look at the staff area, for instance, now it is developed into all of the offices, all of the meeting rooms, all of the desks. Is all I'll point out of this, because we will dive deeper into this plan in a slide where we've blown it up even a little bit more. The only big move that we made is where initially we had thought about adult as being separated into two zones and having the business center with frontage here towards the Elstro Plaza. In working with the staff, their feeling was they would prefer to really have all of the public side to where it didn't feel like an off-limits space with it being a business center, to really have all of that open to the public along that whole side. So instead of the business center being here, it did move up to here. It still has access to windows, but still close to the front door, which was an important part of the business center to be able to come in, do whatever business function you needed. That may just be jump on a computer for a 10-minute process and back out the door. So that's all still close proximity, but that was the one big change. Everything else is pretty similar in where it is. You can see the color mapping is pretty much a one-for-one there. Jumping ahead to the lower level, again, we kept that 80-20, we're like 79-21, just to be a little more specific. Again, very general color blocks. Within that, like we mentioned before, there's a lot of stuff baked in that. So this is all of the stuff that programmatically was in each of those. The biggest move you can see here is that the Genealogy History Center really moved down to this end of the building. And I think that had more to do with, as we started to lay out, you can see the stacks here. It started to make sense to have continuity of all of that stuff worked together. And then from a staffing standpoint, whoever staffs this space can help monitor this space and vice versa. Where in this iteration, it felt like genealogy and history was very separated from this, and it got to be, from a staffing standpoint, a little more challenging to maintain.
Kevin, how would
Yes.
access be achieved from the upper level to the lower level?
So a lot of that is occurring, that kind of, this zone here in the middle, that's the primary way to go from up to down, and you can see probably, it's a little small there, there's an elevator and a set of stairs. It's a little more clear here because there's where the set of stairs is coming down, and this is the elevator right here. And I'll just back up for the sake of looking at that from the upper level, as you can see now a full run of stairs and the elevator there. Yes?
Is this going to involve actually demolishing the outside walls completely?
It is not a complete demolition. It's gonna be, at a minimum, taking off the brick, because we were gonna have to do that anyways to make just general repairs to the outside. So the brick will have to come off of the building, but all of this, I will say most of the structural steel is gonna stay, and even some of that backup wall can stay. So like there's gonna be, behind the brick, there's gonna be some metal stud framing that can stay. But in fairness, even some of that is going to come out so we can start to get outlets in, so we can start to make some other changes. And bear with me for just a minute, I'm gonna hop ahead to this. Because this just kind of blows up that plan. I'll help you answer your question. A good example on this side is right now where you see we've kind of got that brick, little windows in between. We're really proposing, and you'll see this better when we jump ahead to some of the 3D views, to really opening that up so that the glass on that end ultimately gets to be more like that north end, so you get more views out. So I think it's more of gonna be a surgical demolition of stuff than just that we're going through and sort of with a sledgehammer, so to speak, taking everything out.
Isn't it rather unusual for the bricking, 50 years, and then is there any recourse against who did it?
The statute of limitations is 10 years on anything like that, and in fairness, I'd have to go back, and Sue could probably answer that in terms of who designed, built, et cetera. I don't know if they're even in business at this point, being 51 years ago, 52 years ago. So, in fairness, no though, because that kind of 10 years, that hard line to be able to say, you didn't do the right thing. Oops. Apologize for that. I got a little startup. And again, in fairness, 50 years is, it's not ideal, but I think it's a case of, and we've talked about this in some of the previous, technologies changed, and I think the way it got applied, it was, when I think about the systems that got installed, it would be the same components, but they would have gotten installed a little differently today to give them more life. And I think that's where there weren't the appropriate weeps to get, moisture out of that wall. It started to build up and started to cause some of that rot and rust that we started to see on some of
It's
that
just
structure.
frustrating because we're, redoing some of the buildings downtown that have been around a lot longer.
Correct.
Okay.
And I will say, in fairness, having gone through those buildings and helped with some of those assessments, are also in a lot worse shape in a lot of cases. So, in fairness, they've taken a little bit of a hit too, with some of that time. So, it is part of the process, good or bad. But no, there's not really a recourse to be able to go back to anybody else to kind of help with this. This, again, blows up the upper level plan a little bit more, just so we can see everything. Just as a reminder, this north side, this is more of the vehicular drop-off. And again, we're not saying the car is coming into the building, but there is a canopy that goes out here, and we'll see this a little more with the site plan. There is a set of steps then that come up. This is actually all would be undercover. You're not seeing like the canopy here, but it would cover also this ramp. So you're gonna have a set of steps and a ramp to get up to this level from that parking area over here. The green represents the marketplace. And what that is a combination of just all the public things that are almost like I'm coming to the foyer and all the things I see on my way to my destination. So a lot of times it's populated with some additional shelving where I can see what's new, what's the new magazine, what's the new books, even what's new in teens, what's new in children's. Some of that stuff can get out here. That'll ultimately be a programmatic decision that the staff will make moving forward with this project. So that stuff tends to get put into this as you walk by. The other thing you're seeing are a lot of tables and chairs of different varieties that go along here. So I know we talked and looked in some of our previous images at some booth type seating, like you might have at a restaurant, a table in between with a bench seat on either side, some loose tables and chairs. It can be moved around, reconfigured, all with access to the outside view here. The other piece that's important to point out is this is where the friends of the library would be. I know there's been a lot of question about where would they be at the end of the day. I think rather than where the Friends has an event where something happens, what this means is there's always going to be a presence there of a Friends space to display, sell books. We've even seen where they've got a permanent Friends location like this, and they even sell other stuff. Those could be cups, those could be, bookmarks, things like that. Again, ultimately that will depend on how the group wants to run that space, but that is what this larger space is here. Associated with that, there's also a storage / processing area. So that would be a space where the Friends of the library can bring materials into, sort through it, process it. Just for scale, that's a desk and that's the space for a person to sit, and that's like a 3-foot door. So there's plenty of shelving all along the sides and additional spaces where boxes could be brought in, processed, broken down, moved back out, and prepare things in the shelves along the edge before they get brought out to the space. So I know there's been a little bit of question about, is there room, Friends still operate in this space? I will say this is more space than some other Friends have in some other libraries, so I think it's a yes. I think it will just be what's the process that then needs to be followed to kind of make that work for a group that's been used to having kind of a lot more space than this in the past. The other thing then to point out off of this, it's shown here in purple. There are 2 areas to this. We're pointing and saying exterior balcony. This area, kind of that's line up in this. That's right now where the outdoor children's area is, that patio that you come out to. People probably haven't been out there in recent history because it's starting to fall off the building, it's starting to collapse, it's a bit like a fun house out there. There's really nothing plumb and level about it anymore. So from a safety standpoint, it's not a place that really people should be out there. So that would be kind of refurbished, I will say, because there's parts of that we can salvage, there's parts of it we're just gonna have to fix to take care of the fun house effect. But the other thing we looked at was really creating a little bit of a balcony here. So where there was the ramp that brings you up to the main entrance today, take that idea and just turn it into more of a balcony setting where you can come out either of these two doors and get out into this outdoor space. That's doing two things. It's providing additional opportunities for being outside. It's also providing a level of shading down below in that space, which I know was another concern that was brought up in part of the forums. One of the things that's not well shown here is there will not be the ability to get out onto this balcony on this side. There will end up being some kind of a barrier there. And what I mean by barrier is it's gonna feel more like a fence or something where I can still see through it. There would be a gate so I could go one way out, but I won't be able to get back in necessarily. And that's all about just making sure that everybody's safe. Anybody that wants to come in has to come through one of these doors after going by the main circulation desk. And also then so that after hours, this doesn't become a place where things are happening because we've got a balcony here again that people could go over if kids are messing around on this balcony after hours and there's no adults to monitor that situation. So it will at the end of the day be a controlled space, and by that I just mean you have to come through the library to use it. So again, green being marketplace, and then as you move into this red space, this is the fiction collection for adults. So that's the fiction books, that's some magazines, that's some newspapers all happening in this space up here. The other thing to point out is in this, and this probably falls into marketplace, it's probably a gray area, is really a space where there is vending machines. So you see some tables here and then some just squares along this edge. I know there was talk about, is there a cafe, is there a vending machine? Again, I've seen libraries go both ways. From a how do we maintain it standpoint, cafe is in like a man, I'm going to Starbucks, I'm going to Roscoe's in the library, can be a challenge. So I think right now we're just looking at that being more of a vending opportunity where you can come get a beverage, you can come get a snack, and then be able to kind of be at one of these seats or move out onto the balcony and kind of enjoy what the library has to offer. The rest of this, as you can see, is all of the stacks. So we have taken into account, I know there's been that question of, but where are the shelves? Well, there are the shelves, and those shelves represent all of the books that have been in the previous collection that just being reconfigured in other formats. But we followed the same format in terms of the library has said, here is our collection, it has to fit back into this plan. The other thing that you're seeing down here on this lower edge, the south edge, you can see that there's actually 4 meeting rooms down here as well as some loose seating. So just a variety of opportunities to have some different seating configurations, but also then that quiet meeting space. And I think the nice thing from a staffing standpoint is all of it being really within visibility of that main desk. So if somebody needs help, if something needs to be monitored, it can all be seen from that desk so that it doesn't feel like anybody's outside of visibility of the main desk and the main circulation spaces. Again, as Dick had asked earlier, stairs to go down, elevator to go down, and the additional space that you see around that is just that kind of connection to the lower level with some railing around that so that there's a bit of a visual connection between the upper and lower space. Again, from just an ease to see what's down there, but then also from a monitoring standpoint. Mentioned earlier the business center here. So you can see even within that, there's also 3 enclosed meeting spaces. So those again would be more, I would say, collaborative spaces, probably associated with the functions that are in the business center. There's a couple of quick, I just want to come in and again, hop on the internet workstations, do my thing, get out of here. There's also a staff point here. And that's more of a, almost like this, where I've got a little bit of space, maybe a little bit more. Think of this as more like a tech service help desk, and then I'm gonna come if I need a little more help with a checkout or a book. This is, hey, I need help with how to work with a copier, work with a scanner, work with a printer. That's what all of this equipment would be along this perimeter here. And then some desks where there's the opportunity to do some layout space or some collaboration in the middle of that. And again, with connections still to the outside as part of that, and seeing kind of who's coming and going at the front door of the building. The other big space here then that we're seeing the orange, this is the children's department. So to be clear, where we've saying the blue is staff, there is some area, and it's really this space back here. This is the youth staff that's associated with that, so that would not be public space. I think some of the confusion with why is that not in blue is more from a programmatic standpoint. We always had to make sure that the youth staff went with the youth service, where other staff could be separated from the services that they were providing. So this is really that, should it be in blue, should it be not? I don't know, but at the end of the day, really the line of demarcation is really along this here. Above this line up here, that's all public space. This is all that house space. So when you come within that space, you've got 2 rooms here. These are additional meeting rooms within children's, because there's some meetings that happen with children, and those can be wraparound services, those can be visitations, those can be, hey, we want to do some kind of tutoring to happen within those spaces. Those would be 2 spaces that are just specific to that. This is another small room that's more of a sensory room or a lactation room, a room where you need a level of privacy and again, separation from the rest of what's going on. It may be you've got some kids that are a little bit overwhelmed by everything that's happening. Bless you. That was a lot. But a sensory room to kind of have that timeout opportunity, and that may be an adult that needs some timeout. I know there are times I could use some timeout from my kids. But then all of the stacks associated with youth services, as well as seating and other opportunities along the edge there. There's also some computers here that allow for easy monitoring by the desk. This would be the main reception desk when you come in, so you're coming right in, hitting a desk where the staff are. Here's the computers where children or adults helping children can come in and find materials. The ability to help and monitor right there. There's also 2 restrooms within the children's area. So that's really what that is, to have 2 restrooms and drinking fountains associated with that. And then this, a large program room. So we've been talking about somewhere in the range of, 50 people could be in that room. So that's some tables just representing, for a sense of scale, what are about 25, 30 kids looking like. It's not even quite half the room. Along with just some indication of, is that a frontage to that? I'll say stage, but by that I don't mean a step up. I just mean that more as a focal point and how we do that, treat that architecturally. There's also some shelving in that space then with sinks and things, so that as they're having youth programs where there may be a craft time or whatever that is, that can all happen in this room with a flooring that's a little more sympathetic to, ooh, we got glitter everywhere, oops, there's glue everywhere, whatever may happen in that space. Easier to clean up than out here, we're probably gonna have carpet or something that's a little more sound dampening. Again, all of the staff spaces are really happening back in this area. And unless there's a specific question, I don't necessarily want to get into that. I think that's more working with the library staff. We've worked through this process as we think worked well for the staff back in this area. The other blue kind of little space here would be the teen space. So again, what you're seeing is off of that green marketplace. I can go right into the youth, the children's, I can go in the business center, I can go into teens, or I can go down the stairs to the lower level. What we've done with teens is, and just for scale, right now teens fit in that little box. So teens is getting a pretty significant upgrade and feeling like they actually have a space that is their space and not just a kind of a leftover space that would be adjacent to youth services. I think that's been a challenge for staff and parents as well, as I've got a small, but I've got a little bit bigger one. How do I kind of monitor that situation? And then from a staffing standpoint, how do I deal with that? In this case, we've got the desk here. It's got a connection. It's a little probably hard to see out there, but there's a door right in there to where staff can see what's going on in the teen space and get right into that space. Also help the teens through that connection. The other is there's a direct connection for patrons to go from children's also in the teens, but again, monitored right there. So it's not like you're gonna have people that you may not want going back and forth between those two. There's a staff person that can see anybody going back and forth. The way we've set this up, you can see the stacks are right here in this area. So before I actually go, I would say into the rest of the teen space, If there is a younger child maybe who wants to get access to the teen lift stacks, or an adult that want to get into that, they don't have to go into the rest of the teen space. So it kind of becomes a shared resource between all of the people that use the library. But then you get into this and actually have then the spaces, so there's study tables of a variety of kinds, seating spaces, and there's also a teen program space. So similarly to the children's area, there's shelving and storage and sinks, similar shelf storage here, storage associated with that room if we want to move some tables and chairs out, and then you can see tables and chairs represented there. So all of that is kind of what's going on the first floor here, the upper level. The one thing I did forget to mention is we carved out an outdoor children's area, and that's the space where we talked about, that's, you know, outdoor gardening, or maybe some kind of water table kind of activities that are gonna happen out there. But on a good day, the thing we plan to do is an activity that may wanna be in here, if it's a nice day, there's as much space out here as there is, so kind of from a one-from-one standpoint, if I'm planning on 20 kids being in this, those 20 kids can go right out there and do that same activity. And then if it starts to rain, we can move those 20 kids right inside without having to, oh gosh, we don't have enough room to go from one to the other. So giving flexibility depending on the weather that we have. The other things just to point out, again, that we've got the arrows to, balconies, we do have expanded this courtyard down below, and we'll talk more about that when we hop down to the lower level. There is a ramp that's been put in on this side to replace the ramp that we have here, to be able to have ADA accessibility up to this entrance along the steps, so that would kind of be reconfigured. And then we've moved the book drop from this location down to here. And that has as much to do with patron functionality as with, I'm gonna say, staff safety and book safety. For those who have not been in this book drop, it's kind of dropping into a cave and coming down a bit of a cliff that, frankly, if you go in and probably get a book as a staff member, you're a little bit taking your life in your own hands. There's things coming at you as you're trying to get back into the chute because of those books really going almost underground to get there. So really moving that down here so that it works better for staff as well as patrons. The other big thing, and this won't necessarily as much matter to you, other than I will tell you that the staff that serve you as the public will be much happier people. This garage here, if you go into it, it drops down about 3.5 feet. So anything that gets delivered into this garage then has to be brought back up about 3.5 feet. So every book that comes in, every Amazon delivery, every bucket of anything, every, you know, stick of glue, they bring it in, they have to like bring it down, bring it back up all day long, every day. What we're doing is leveling that out so that everything can come in at one level and just be wheeled right in the door. So I think this is one of the things that staff were like, in my head, they were cheering. I didn't see anybody get out of their chair, but I saw a lot of yes, you know?
More stairs.
I think that was probably one of the big criticisms that we heard from a staffing standpoint, is there was a lot of work they were putting in, because they have a lot of stuff coming with Evergreen as well as go out every day in addition to the other things. So again, a lot of improvements on the front end and a lot of improvements on the back end from the staffing standpoint. So I did a lot of talking. Are there any questions before we go to the lower level? Yes.
So, I think you pointed out to the restrooms in the kids area, but you didn't point out any others. Is there any in the adult area? Okay, so there will be some up front.
Yes. And I know we talked in the past, so I'll just address it. And I know we just paid to renovate these, so I'll address that too. There are restrooms here.
And there will be after the remodel?
There are not planned to be right now. And it has more to do with, we needed to get all of the shelving into that space and make it all work out. And by the time you start to put it in, it was starting to encroach on that.
But they will be at the other part, so there will be restrooms, though, at
Correct.
least upstairs.
Correct.
And a drinking fountain as well, like,
Correct.
that's connected with that one then?
So those are right there.
Okay. Cause I thought, man, you're gonna make us go all the way back to the kids area just to use the restroom.
Nope. So I apologize for not pointing out, but yes, there are restrooms up here.
Are the restrooms in the kids designed as family bathrooms?
Yes. And in fact, we've got one that we looked at that would have kind of even the adult changing table and kind of the functionality that you would need in that larger space. So that will be part of what we have going forward as well.
What about dual toilets, like adult toilet and kid toilet?
Yeah, so that's something else we looked at even sink wise. So there's kind of a high sink, low sink in one of those. I don't know that we put it in both, but again, that's part of the detailing we'll be doing going forward.
Then the other thing, when I look at the kids area, it feels like the design initially before the renovation that we just did a couple of years ago, undoing some of that look and feel. Is that intentional? Am I picturing it wrong, looking at it on paper?
I think it's a mixed bag of that, I will say. And by that, I mean, I don't think that anybody sat down and said, hey, we want to go backwards. But I think there was an acknowledgement that some of the zones are they're challenged because they're in a little bit of a smaller space. I think this spreads that out a little bit more. And part of that was actually bringing the heights of some of those shelves down. So it kind of just started to become that without sitting down and thoughtfully saying, we want to go backwards in time.
So one of the things.
So that's sort of a non-answer to your
One of the
question,
things
but
I don't see here, and as my kids have gotten older, it doesn't apply as much, but there was a season where the open play area was important in the kids section.
Yep.
And I don't see I don't see where I would feel comfortable with my kids doing that in that design.
yeah, so there's a couple of things to that, to your point, and I think part of it is we've cluttered the plan up with furniture. Just being fair about it. So one thing is really this space in the middle. That is envisioned as more of an open play element. That is not like I'm sitting there, but that is a thing where things can happen around that as part of that. I think the other is that these little zones in the windows, we've talked about those being zones, not just at seating, but we start to create sub-zones by age that kind of work around. So, you know, maybe this one doesn't have furniture, this one does, these two don't, so these become little sub-play zones versus it looking like a space with just shelving and furniture. I think we hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Okay. I'm not sure that, trying to think back to 3 year ago me, that I feel this resonates with what I was looking for when I had multiple kids in that
Sure.
1 to 7 trying to entertain and help in multiple areas.
Sure.
So.
And I guess, can you be more specific about that?
So I'm not sure I would want my children to be creating the Duplo Lego train mess right in front of the primary circulation staff area.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, based on how the stacks are set and where the play area is, that I would feel comfortable that I could have eyes on a child who is thankfully playing self-contained while I'm trying to find a book for another child.
And maybe what will help or hurt, I don't know. We've got a 3D image as we go forward, and it'll give you a little bit more of a sense of what that looks like in there. But I mean, again, good point. I think as we go forward, and we'll continue to work with, staff to kind of address that. I think it was more about making sure we had the space to create the potential for some of these zones, staff, get all the books in, and then have the meeting spaces associated with it. So in fairness, the step we haven't taken is to really drill down to address now programmatically what do we want to do within that space. So it's probably a fair criticism that you're not seeing how does this really work. So, does anybody else?
One more quick question. Going back to the purple area next to the green marketplace, you said there was a desk that would help with printing and all that. So, yeah, are the printers going to be in that area then?
Yes.
Okay,
So that would be really what's intended to be really all along here.
okay. I just wondered, because you said there'd be people to help us with this, I just wondered if they were gonna be close to that area,
Yep.
or we'd have to go ask for help and then go a mile down the library and.
Nope. And the intention is even, if this person isn't here because it's a slower day and maybe there's only, one person coming in, the desk is right here, so there's a, pretty close connection of, I'm right here and have to ask this person, and they can come out and help me if this person isn't available. And again, that's ultimately gonna be, how does the library staff, how busy, that's a thing.
And it won't be like from one end of the library to the other.
Nope. And I think that was, again, a lot of what we heard was, you gotta go a long way to get this service that I just wanna be able to come in the door and have access to.
Exactly.
So, this was a direct response to what we heard from you and others that brought that up. Does anybody have any additional questions, comments about the upper level?
It seems like right now in the adult section, there by the windows, there's a lot of sitting space that if people wanted to just sit and read quietly.
Yep.
I don't see as much quiet sitting area, you know, the market space is gonna be
Yep.
louder.
And so there's a little bit more of that downstairs. And I think that was the intention of what we've been saying, you know, all along. This is gonna be a noisy space. I've got kids running through, I've got teens running through, I've got people going to the basement. If I'm looking for a quiet zone, this is not where I'm going. This is, I'm really noisy here, I maybe get a little quieter here because I don't have kids necessarily coming. This is all an open space, so I'm gonna have to go downstairs to find a quieter space, in fairness.
Yes.
So, let's get a lower level now. So again, lower level programmatically is pretty simple. Again, there's not a ton of seating space down here, but you get more as you start to get into this. So again, I'm coming down the steps. This is still open space here, but I've got the opportunity to kind of get off to the side, a little bit out of the way. I'm not connected to the noise coming up here. I've got some seating zones, and again, this is just a representation of the spaces there. I think we still got to build out how much soft seating do we have, how many tables do we have. The space exists because we've actually ended up, and there's shelving, it's hard to see, even along the walls and under the windows too. So there's more shelving than what it's going to just appear with the stuff that's off of the wall here. But there's also then tables and additional seating around here that's probably going to get added to this even further. I'll just jump to it so I don't forget again. Another set of restrooms down here, so I don't have to necessarily go upstairs for that. It's right in the middle of that space. It's kind of tucked under the stairs, so even though it looks like it's a little bit in your face, it's really not. There's also then, in addition to these two large meeting rooms that you see, there's also a kitchen that can serve both of those with an overhead window into either of those. So I can come down the stairs, bring stuff down the elevator, come out, bring things into that kitchen and serve it into either of those spaces. So kind of like what we have now at the back of this room, you're gonna have that then into both of those rooms. There's also a large storage room here that provides the ability to clear out all of the stuff from either of these, so there's that flexibility. So where in this room, stuff just gets pushed up along the side. It was important to everybody to have this, to have more flexibility for what can happen in both of these rooms. There's also a connection between these, so you know, if you have a really large event and I want to go between these, I can certainly do that as well. Both of them do have independent access, so I can get in or out here, I can get in or out here or here as well. And I think one of the things, just from a scale standpoint, to help everybody understand, this room here is the equivalent of the space you're sitting in right now, plus if it was to open up those two side rooms over here. So you can do anything that you're doing in this room, plus imagine having those two side rooms open. That is the space. This allows for potentially an even larger function. And I know you're sitting here saying, but I've never been to an event at the library that needs this much space. What it is there has been that question and that ask for those events, but this is the limitations of what we have. And the other thing is, not only that, but if I look in this one, the way the two side rooms open, it doesn't allow for a big open function like this. So even this is really limited. It can't do what this can. So I think the library knows from the asks that they've had that they have this need for spaces and even larger functions than what can go on in here now.
I've actually been here for a couple of activities in this room, which was too crowded.
And I think
Glad
that's
the
been
fire
the
marshal wasn't here. So you do need that as larger space.
Yep, I think there's been some who have said, really, you know, you really need that, but again, I've been to a few too that, wow, it's really dense in here, I don't know that that's okay. So this is gonna allow for those, as well as two things to happen at once, because that's the other thing we heard, is we're having to turn things away because we're using this space and there's no other space in this library to do a similar event at the same time. The other thing from a functional standpoint, it's a little different between these. This, I would say, is more of kind of like this room. There's not a lot of access necessarily to the outside. It is, but it's kind of skewed off here to the side. This, I would say, is more of my darker space where I'm using technology like this. Yes, I'm gonna be able to get a little bit of daylight with this areaway that we're creating on this side, but it's mostly not gonna have access to the outside. This room here, again, imagine taking this room and now extending it all the way down, pretty much to where the stairs are now. The thinking is to really open that whole side up so it's got a good connection to the outside, more so than we even got here. Because while we do have these windows that go on an angle, again, they feel pretty disconnected. It's kind of this wall on down, like you have outside in the lobby, that will have the ability to open up out onto that lower courtyard. And just like the children's that we talked about up above, there's as much space here as there is out here. So what we're looking about is looking at potentially pushing a little bit of the edges back and terracing it more a little bit instead of having the slope for those that are a little more familiar with the outside. So that's similar to what we said in children's. If I want to bring 200 people out here and it's a nice day, oh my, it's starting to lightning, let's take them all in. We can just go back and forth within these two spaces without having to encroach on that. So I think we all felt like functionally that was important for the library from a use standpoint. The other spaces that we have, just sticking with the meeting rooms, this is a roughly 20-person meeting room with the technology you'd think of I can do a presentation like this. I've got something I can project on the wall. There's also an 8 to 10-person meeting room down here. It'll be probably glass around these sides and a meeting room with a presentation on this wall here and connection to the outside. This here is the genealogy history space. There's going to be a lot of open glass connection between these two. The archivist would have an office here with windows and the ability to see and monitor this space. Kind of like we talked about in the business center up above where there's a station like this for help. There will be one that's located out here as well to kind of assist. So in addition to this person, there will be somebody out here. We just hadn't quite identified where that person would be. I'm half imagining it's almost a mobile station depending on what's going on. Because if you can imagine a big event, there could be an event where there's stuff in all of these rooms. You know, maybe there's a tour of Europe event going on and there's different countries represented in these spaces. If you'll visit stations, for instance, you know, there could be a big thing happening. So that station may want to move around depending on what's happening down here. So I think building in flexibility is very important in this process. But again, back to archive, office, dense storage, so that rolling storage for things like artwork that they may want to not have it out all the time, but bring it out on occasions. And then all of the stuff that archives has now, all of the books, all of the maps, all of that stuff is down in here with tables for layout and it's more casual seating. Then the blue, again, is all of the staff space. And one thing I didn't point out that the staff don't have now, but for those that have gotten trapped, confused, lost by the elevator that's back here that does connect you at that lower level, this is only a staff circulation space. Back to how do I get up and down, it's really primarily using this. The other thing that I hadn't really mentioned before, because it's easier to mention now, there will still be some circulation here in a set of stairs, but that's more intended as like an emergency situation. The other thing that it does is you can see I've got a direct entry from this outdoor space into that stairwell. So there can be events that potentially happen down here without having to necessarily go into the rest of the library, which you really can't do today. Because that's another thing we heard a lot in our sessions was, it feels like you can't go down to that space. How do I get down there? How do I connect to it? So we want to really provide more connectivity to it, and even a direct connection where I can get up and down without necessarily having to come through the library. So now we're going to skip to some, what are we talking about? So this, and again, I'm just going to preface this with, there are some choices made by 1 or 2 people. We have not sat here with you all and said, do you like this or not? There is going to be part of that process after we get approval to go ahead and do a project. The idea is more about what kind of light do we get into these spaces? What is it like when I come in? What can I see? So please do not get hung up on, do I like that color or not? Or do I like that piece of furniture? Those aren't the final pieces of furniture or colors. So this is if I were to walk in this front door and be standing at this corner and turn to look down, what would I see? What you're gonna have off to your left is a lot of light, all that seating that we talked about, some form of book shelving as I go down through there, and we've only shown one just so you can see more of what's going on down through there. Because just from a scale standpoint, this is like 18 feet wide. There's a lot of space there. It may not feel like it, but there's a lot, that's a wide space. So there's the ability to have seating on both sides and stuff down in between there. But you can see, I can still see from one side of the library to the other, from one set of windows to the other. But what I'm seeing here pretty immediately is that's where the staff desk is. So I can kind of come right in, have a lot of openness, a lot of sunlight coming in. Again, that's facing towards Elster Park. I can go through there out on the balcony. I can sit in these spaces. I put my cans on, and, ignore the rest of the world and work on my laptop. Or I can have them off and be engaged with the world. You kind of see a little bit of a light there. That's actually reflection. So that's right where the Friends of the Library would be as I'm going into the front desk. I'm going to walk right by Friends of the Library. This one's a little bit tougher to understand, but that's that elevator, just to orient yourself. It's right in the middle of the plan, so that's where the stairs are that are going on down. Again, everything's pretty much open through there. A lot of what we looked at is how do we bring shelf heights down? So there's not a place that feels like I'm in the middle of shelves, so they're kind of getting a little bit more spread out. The other thing that this is looking at is, bless you, skylight above, so we get the lighting that comes into the middle of the space and then connects with the lower level. Again, way preliminary, but it's been important to how do we showcase then some of the Tiffany windows? How do we bring light in without having it in a harmful way on a facade where maybe it gets like too much light and they get overheated, and so that more people see them than even where they're tucked away now. So maybe bringing them out into the middle of the space. I think that's going to be a lot more conversation as to whether they're really there or not with some of the folks that represent the genealogy and history. But again, in the middle, you've kind of got that circulation with tables, chairs, meeting rooms are kind of here in the background, and the ability to really monitor what all's going on in those spaces so that bad things can't necessarily happen in those spaces. Children's area, so again, don't know if this is answering your question. To me, it feels a bit like a sea of shelving. But in the middle of this, there is something going on, and again, that's actually like a 30 by 30 space, so it's actually a pretty darn big space, even though it feels smaller in there. But all those shelves are dropped pretty doggone low, so you can see over everything. And there's gonna be like zones around the perimeter. And again, that was kind of intentional, so if somebody's gotta go past this to get out, where staff could see anybody that's trying to escape, for the little escape artists. So that there's a set of eyes in addition to mom or dad that's able to see, hey, they're headed down the aisle and headed for the door. But a lot of color, a lot of playfulness, and you can see past this, that would get you to that outside space. It's really adjacent to the activity room. It's just behind here. This is going down to that lower level. So for those who haven't necessarily been back in the staff offices, there are windows there that are up about 4 or 5 feet. Those windows would stay connected to that areaway, so there'd be a lot of daylighting coming down on this side. There's stacks and tables down in this space. Right on the other side of this glass, so you'd have, a set of doors and windows, so it's kind of firewalled from a sound standpoint, would be that history and genealogy on the other side, with some elements of that history kind of starting to connect to this space on this side. Because you're seeing this is kind of right here at the edge of the stairs. So as I come down, that's really what you're walking down into at the bottom of those steps. So again, just a little bit more sense of like what those spaces are starting to look like in terms of the volume of spaces and things. I'm going to jump now to the site, and I've got about 15 minutes before we're out of time, so if anybody needs to leave, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Because I am going to try to go through this, and if there's any other questions, answer those as we go as well. So the site, there's about 2 acres here, just a little under. The building is 53,000 square feet. We're a little less than 40% site coverage, and we're actually adding 3 parking spaces. So I'll explain how we're doing that. This is actually what the library owns. For those who don't know, this is the library site that everybody thinks of as the library. The library also has parking over here, which is mostly staff parking. The other thing, this is just bringing back an image that we had before. We've got a one-way street being North A, and then here's all the streets we have, most of which are two ways, other than this on the south side where the drop-off happens. So these were some key points that we had talked about before: book drop-off, primary entrance, and then some headaches for in and out right at this location that needed to be reconciled with better management of plantings, sightlines, so you can get in and out of that a little more safely. Again, parking here, parking over across the street at Elstro there, and then the parking that's here, which a lot of that, you know, I'll be honest, for the longest time, I didn't know I was allowed to park here. It felt like you shouldn't because the entrance is down here. But the idea that there's a lot of parking, so again, when we talk about the vehicular entrance, that's kind of what was making us think that made sense here. This being more, especially as downtown's getting developed, a lot of walking that's happening from this direction, though again, at either entrance, you could walk in either one. But looking at that's what started to make, I think, the team think about two entry points there. Again, still with parking at either. But the parking changes that are adding to, in some cases we've got taking away. So in one, it's really this parking up here at the very north side. There's these little islands that kind of break this up. We're reconfiguring that to put a large island in the middle, so there's really not a net gain of any parking here. The reason for this going in is the fact that we have this canopy here and drop-off, so we don't want people backing into that space. So it was pull the parking away from that, protect people backing in and out to allow for that drop-off to occur. So we're actually, under number 2, also losing that parking. So there's a little bit of loss here. But then keeping this parking along this area here. Where we're making up the parking is in 3, where right now there is no parking here because I've got the book drop-off. Because the book drop-off is actually moving up here, we're creating a pull-off for that, that's away from all this parking. We can actually go ahead and expand that parking, so that's where we make up for the losses we've got up here to create that drop-off space if we can. Again, just contextualize the building changes, just to give a sense of where we're at relative to roads and parking. Number 1 is that children's outdoor space. So what we're looking at is this is what we've got today with kind of the connector bridge, for example. This is what we are going to have. So I think there was the question about the lower area, does that encroach on sidewalk? No, the sidewalk is still going to pass through there, just as a point of reference. Number 2 was we're creating that areaway I think we talked about, so there would be the areaway, but there's still going to be a sidewalk, and then parking. So again, it's not like it's right up against the road necessarily, there's plenty of space for all that to happen. 3 is that drop-off canopy, so I can drop somebody off undercover and they can get inside the building without ever necessarily having to get out into the weather. 4 is everything that we looked at with that expansion of the lower level, the balcony spaces, all of that outdoor event space that's happening along here at both the upper and the lower level. And then 5 is that book drop really moving from here back there. So again, that just gives you a sense of how those changes we talked about in the plan related to that space. So now's the part that scares everybody, good or bad. This is the library today, so we're just going to go through a couple of images that look at library today versus what library could potentially look like. And again, knowing it's not final, it's just how does we make some changes to accomplish some of what we talked about in the previous meetings. There was a sense of we like the brick, and again, I like the brick too. I think we want to keep some of the brick. So we're looking at elements that remain of the brick, and in fact, when we create the new entrance over here as a drop-off, really reinforcing that brick that's back here. So you can see if that's where you come in today across the ramp, that would still stay brick. We kind of recreate that to reinforce that on this side, so that entries kind of feel similar in terms of being this kind of monumental brick element. But one other thing we talked about is how does the library have a little bit more presence on the street, especially on that North A side as I'm kind of passing by this and creating some kind of visual presence to it. But right now the library does a good job of hiding itself, giving a little more prominence, bringing in more natural light into that main entry space. as well as providing some overhang and shade on this side other than in the far late end of the day. So really kind of creating those both. You can see the shape of the building, even though these look vastly different, it's the same footprint of that building. We haven't really changed. It's not like we're structurally adding stuff to this or building additional bays. It's just re-looking at how we open some of this space up. And I'm going to continue to move around the building and just kind of follow around. So this is that end that had the children's end. Again, looking at I would say some playfulness, some blissfulness, a mix of, again, still brick and panels in between. One of the big things that I'll point out is these are those elements that we've got on the north side that are having a lot of structural problems. And by that, I mean where I showed you that imagery, you could stick your hand between the brick and the metal. In this case, these are actually physically starting to lean away from the building, as well as starting, if you look down that brick, it looks kind of like waves down through there. There's some pretty major stuff that would have to be done to keep those. When we look at that, they're really not doing anything. They're on the north side of the building, so they're not even really providing shade from a harsh south sun. So there's really no reason to rebuild those. So the thinking is that we would continue to keep the glass on that side, but not necessarily rebuild those elements. And that's more of just a savings, because there's not a good reason to build them back and to spend the dollars to do that. But everything else really along here is just similar elements, dressed, I'll say, in a different way, with some enclosure around that space to kind of create a zone where kids can't get away from that outdoor space so that they're protected. Yes, sir.
Am I reading or seeing your designs that you're planning a glass outside window on your lactation sensory room?
No. And that will be a how do we treat that? I mean, it is along that wall, you are correct. And in fairness, it was at one time over by where the restrooms were, and then because of how space was working out, it got moved, and so that was something we just said we're gonna have to deal with that. But no, that would be counter to a sensory room. Garage still then exists on this end, so you can see it's a pass-through on this side, as well as when you turn the corner, where today I have 2 garage doors, that is what is becoming that kind of drop-off element. So eliminating one, because the library has acknowledged we really don't need that. What we need is better ability to bring stuff in and out of the library. So there would still be an overhead door here, that is that door. And then you'll still have we are taking a lot of this brick out to really open that side up. Now we're acknowledging, because we're smart enough people to say, but that's the south side of the building, Kevin, that makes no sense. That's why we're adding a little bit more of an overhang to that side to kind of help create that shadow, and we would tune that overhang. And by that I mean make it so that at the highest point of the sun during the summer, I'm not getting any sun getting in the building, but by the time I get to winter, actually that sun feels kind of nice to come in. So the sun starts to drop down, you would start to get some sun that comes into the floor plane, the way it's showing like that. And again, turning around, honestly, when we look at this building, it's a nice building. There's not a lot you need to do to it. So again, this is probably the side that best shows, really is all we're doing is taking the form that's there. We know we have to do stuff with the brick, so we're changing a little bit of the look, but more to reinforce that, these are focal points. That's book drop. That's an entry point. But this is kind of a main entry point. This is probably the biggest intervention that's happened. The rest is pretty much the massing that you see today, the height, the size, not a lot's changing. And again, that's a lot of being frugal with the dollars we've got to spend. We've got to fix stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to spend a lot of dollars on it. So just trying to make the improvements that we talked about and identified in some of the previous sessions, creating more prominence, creating more covered space, creating more outdoor opportunities on this side connected to the park. And again, just to give you a different perspective on that, so you can kind of see that from overhead, it helps you see kind of what's down in some of the zones. Again, kind of that entry side, kind of see that areaway that's down in there. The sidewalk and parking, you can see kind of that children's area, and then that activity space, you see down in that garage and kind of how the parking is laying out. And just jump around to the other side. There's that areaway that goes down in that provides the lighting at that lower level, down where the genealogy, history, and nonfiction collections would be. You can kind of see down in that space, you know how you've got that connection up above and that visibility over the railing, where you've got all of that outdoor space along that side of the building. These are just some close-ups to get more of a sense of scale. So again, at that lower courtyard, you know, the opportunity for seating, some plantings along the side, and that connection to that indoor space. There you can see, you know, up and down, those are both kind of visually connected spaces. With that ability to really, you know, sit here, have, you know, we've got people potentially sitting inside, potential to sit outside, have shade, you know, get my drink from the vending machine, come outside and watch what's happening over at Elster Plaza if there's something happening over there that day. The entry, so that is that entry on the north side that we talked about. Again, kind of replicating that entry, having some covering, to be able to get upstairs ramp. I think this is an area we'll have to tune. I don't know that there's enough canopy, frankly, to cover that ramp, but at the end of the day, we will end up with something where the whole thing is happening undercover, with the ADA parking right there to get in and take advantage of that. And again, in that children's space where there's seating, there's some potential for porosity. By that I just mean see it in and out of that space. I know there's always been the question and the challenge, and we'll have to continue to talk about that. There's a lot of street noise out there. How do we deal with that? And there's a street over here. Not ignoring it, just thinking through how do we have some visuals so it feels more open than completely enclosed. We'll still have to figure out how to mitigate the noise as part of that and provide activity out here in these children's spaces. So again, next big steps are going to be, we've got to get the county council approval. Then the library is going to have to go through a lot of not fun paperwork for the bond issuance process. Then we're going to complete the design. And then ultimately there will be a bidding and award process, and then construction will start, which will probably be a 1.5 year process before all of that is done just within that piece itself. So with that, again, that date may change for the meeting with the county council. If you want to stay, you know, ahead of that, here's a way. I'm sure the library will continue to send out notifications. And those within the 2 dates that we'll be meeting with the county council to discuss this further and hopefully get approval to continue this design process moving towards implementation of all of the stuff we've been talking about.